Everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on our Opportunity Alliance Nevada Advisory Committee meeting. We have Jim Berchtold joining us today, our good friend from Legal Aid who jumps in and gives us updates when we need him to. So big thank you to him. Um, but before we get started, I want to welcome Lori Martin and ask her to lead us in a moment of gratitude.
Thank you, Linda. Nice to see you all on this snowy, blustery morning here in northern Nevada. You can see I have my lights on here because my place is so dark this morning. Oh, so let's take a few moments of heart-centered breath. So taking a few generous breaths and imagining that the breath is coming in and out of your heart. Feeling your feet on the ground, appreciating actually this moisture we're getting from Mother Earth today. And I invite you to close your eyes and continuing that heart-centered breath. And having appreciation for someone or something in particular this morning. And from the heart, sending out that appreciation. And when you open your eyes, look around your space with wonder as if you had never seen it like this before. And I invite you to take as much of a 360 look as you can, all the way to the right, looking around your space as if you'd never seen it before. And looking to the left, seeing what surrounds you with new eyes. The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. So seeing you all today in a new light as we launch into our day and consider our work and our connections, seeing them in a new light, in a new way today. So thank you all for taking a moment for yourselves to refresh ourselves this morning.
Thank you, Lori. Appreciate you. Appreciate you leading us in that type of exercise and reminding me to enjoy the beauty of South Lake Tahoe with a nice coating of snow up here. So, yes. So, Lori, do you want to tell us a little bit about what's going on with our Volunteer Financial Navigator program and what you're hearing?
Yes, I would love to. So that quote for me today sort of renewed and inspired me, I'm sure, as you all well know, for the past, really since November, but in particular the past 5 months. We, our financial navigators, have been very concerned about our clients, the calls we're receiving, and what they are experiencing at this time, particularly in Southern Nevada, Clark County, Las Vegas. People who are fearful, concerned, particularly about eviction and what's going to happen at the end of the month. And we are so appreciative of our partners. I'll just say Nevada 211 in particular has been just a great resource for kind of basic needs and helping people with specific concerns and Hope Link of Southern Nevada also that we have been referring people to. And so happy to see Jim here today. He, in fact, inspired our latest script that we are using with our clients, which starts with take action. Yeah, so we are really encouraging people to take action, and we are giving them the full list of what to do. And we are hopeful that is working for them, at least to get the next steps that they need taken care of. We're encouraging them to take action to write to their elected officials, which we know some of them are, and we've given them all those addresses. We can only go so far. So we are grateful that we can empower them, thanks to Jim and his encouraging words. And so I think I'll just leave it at that. We're getting more calls every day now as we reach toward the end of the month, and happy to see our Northern Nevada partners here as well. Brenda, thank you so much. So I think I will leave it at that and leave it back over to Linda to welcome Jim today.
Thank you, Lori. Thanks so much. And a quick update on OANV. We're still, like, Lori is doing great work. What we're happening with our programming, still Lori and her team, very high touch, high caring, high compassion. I don't know. I don't think they ever experienced compassion fatigue. They just keep on keeping on. I'm so proud of them and appreciate them so much. We will have an announcement to make with changes at OANV. We've probably will have a new executive director coming on. I want to make sure all of our I's are dotted and T's are crossed, but very exciting. Couldn't have found a better replacement. So we'll look forward to sharing that information with you when we can. Just know really wonderful things ahead for Opportunity Alliance, and appreciate all of you and your support coming to these meetings all the time. With that said, I'm going to welcome our good friend, Jim Berchtold from Legal Aid of Southern Nevada. He heads up the legal component of consumer rights projects and has a team of over 50 legal aid employees, and they fight for our lower income Nevadans and touch on so many different areas of importance that affect them. I asked him back today to give us an idea of what's happening with with evictions, or maybe what's expected, what mediation is looking like, some new maybe direction. We know take action for sure, but what direction that Lori and her team can help the general public with, and also to talk about maybe how the American Rescue Funds are going to play into this. So welcome, Jim. Such a big thank you. So take it over.
Happy to be here, and thank you all for everything that you're doing. So let's dive right into it, and kind of let me give you an update about what's going on. So first, let's talk about the moratoriums. So I think everybody probably knows that the state moratorium, eviction moratorium, ends the end of this month. So essentially we have another week. The CDC moratorium, however, will last a month after that. So the CDC moratorium does not expire until the end of June. So what exactly does that mean? Well, we were lucky to have the state moratorium in place because the state moratorium was really specific to Nevada evictions. The CDC moratorium, not so much. It is nationwide, so it's broad and not tailored to Nevada evictions. So the way the courts have really interpreted the CDC moratorium is pretty narrow. Really, they've looked at it and said, if the tenant is being evicted for non-payment of rent, then the CDC moratorium can protect the tenant from eviction for the next month. But what we have seen is that as soon as landlords hear that they can't get a non-payment eviction, they simply switch to another type of eviction. They do a no cause eviction, they do a lease violation eviction. So we're seeing ridiculous lease violation evictions, stuff like there's a dead shrub in the yard, so I'm going to evict you. There's you never got renter's insurance, so I'm going to evict you. Even though renter's insurance, the tenant hasn't had renter's insurance for the last 3 years. Now all of a sudden it's a big issue. So we know that the CDC moratorium is not, it might slow evictions, but it will not prevent all evictions like the state moratorium did. That being said, it's still worth the tenant, if they are eligible, signing a declaration and giving it to their landlord to at least have some layer of protection while it lasts. Now, you may have also heard, it was pretty big news that I believe it was the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals or a district court in the Sixth Circuit, I can't remember, actually issued an opinion invalidating the CDC order, saying that the CDC had exceeded its jurisdiction when it issued the moratorium. So a lot of landlords were taking that opportunity to tell their tenants, there is no more moratorium, we're going to evict you. That is absolutely not true. The Department of Justice immediately appealed that decision, and they have obtained a stay of that decision until for the duration of the appeal. So the CDC is in place. There is no talk of extending it, as far as I know. So I think June, the end of June is going to be it. Sisolak has made clear that he is not going to extend the state moratorium. So I think this is it. So what else is happening? So Legal Aid Center has been working in a collaborative work group with the county, Clark County Social Services. This effort is being led by Chief Justice James Hardesty from the Nevada Supreme Court. The justices of the peace from the justice courts in Las Vegas, Henderson, and North Las Vegas have been involved. Shannon Chambers from Home Means Nevada, which runs the eviction mediation program, has been involved. So essentially what the effort is really to try to coordinate the efforts of these entities that work sort of working in their own kind of silos and try to get them all together in a coordinated effort to, if not prevent eviction, at least make sure that the tenant has the opportunity to be linked with that rental assistance that's coming down from the federal government so that that money can get into the hands of the landlords, hopefully avoiding the need for eviction. So that has been actually quite successful, I think. Now, it hasn't actually gone into operation, so I don't know if it will be successful in reality, but the idea is successful. So we had a press conference yesterday with Clark County and the judges, and kind of rolled it out as the Southern Nevada Eviction Prevention Program. And the way it's going to work is basically this. So if a tenant gets an eviction notice and files with the court is going to turn all of that information over to Clark County Social Services. So as soon as the tenant files, that information goes to Clark County Social Services. Clark County will check that information to see whether or not that person has applied for CHAPS, for the rental assistance. If they have not, or if there's some problem with their application, then the county has contracted with 3 nonprofits in the Valley, each one assigned to a different area of the Valley. So Clark County will then take that tenant's information and transfer it to that nonprofit. The nonprofit will then reach out to the tenant and say, look, you haven't applied for CHAPS, or there's a problem with your application. Let's help you get your application on file or get the information that you need to apply for these services, for this rental assistance. So the nonprofits will be the entity helping the tenant collect those documents and get their application on file, because that can be a really unwieldy process for some tenants. So then the mediation component is also being beefed up to hopefully be a better conduit to also try to link the tenant and the landlord to rental assistance. So there's going to be more of a direct link between the mediators and Clark County Social Services, so that the mediators have some ability to check Is the tenant going to be approved? What's the status of the application? What amount are they being approved for? So that there's some ability to negotiate with the landlord and hopefully get that rental assistance all packaged up in the context of that mediation, have all the agreements signed, and no need to go forward with the eviction. So we're hopeful that that's going to work. Now, as part of this plan, what our role, Legal Aid Center, what we are going to really be focusing on for the next couple of months is outreach to tenants, because a lot of this won't work if tenants don't know what they need to do. So we have boiled it down to 4 points, and I will repeat those points one more time because I seem to repeat them in every conversation that I have. So these are the 4 things a tenant needs to do. 1, if the tenant is eligible, the tenant needs to print off a CDC declaration form, sign it, and give it to their landlord. That form is widely available. It's available on our website. 2, the tenant needs to apply for rental assistance. It's easy to do. They go on the CHAPS portal, they upload their documents. Clark County is working really hard to expedite the processing of those applications. 3, if the tenant receives an eviction notice, they must file an answer with the court. So a lot of tenants think answering means, well, I'll go to my landlord and talk to my landlord. And then the landlord says, oh no, don't worry about it. So the tenant doesn't do anything. Or frankly, right now, the tenants right now are so overwhelmed. A lot of them are just frozen. And so they're taking no action whatsoever. So that all of the benefits I talked about, the nonprofits and the mediation, all of that is linked to actually filing with the court. So the tenant, if they receive an eviction notice, they have to file with the court. And that's easier to do than ever. There's a guide and file program that allows the tenant just to do that from home, do it online, and we're setting up some other programs to help tenants with that, which I'll talk about in just a minute. So the 4th thing is, if the tenant files that answer, when the tenant files that answer, they need to elect mediation. So the tenant has to affirmatively say in their answer, I want to mediate. There's a checkbox, they just check the box, and that will steer them into the mediation program. So those are the 4 things we're trying to get out. The 5th thing I kind of add on is, if the tenant has any issues along the way, they can call us at Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada, and we will try to guide them on what to do. So in addition to outreach, what we really want to ensure is that the tenant has the ability in a convenient, accessible way to file that answer with the court. So as I said, there is now a guide and file. It's called Guide and File program. It's like TurboTax. It asks you some questions, you answer the questions, and it files your documents. Super easy, but you have to have internet access and you have to have some technological capabilities. So we have a couple of initiatives to try to open that up to as many tenants as possible. We don't know what June 1st is going to look like. We don't know if it's going to be 10,000 evictions and 10,000 tenants or 1,000 tenants. We're planning for the worst and we're hoping for the best. So these are a couple of things that we're planning on doing right now. So right now, our self-help center, the self-help center that is at the Regional Justice Center where most tenants go for assistance, is only open Monday through Thursday in line with the court's hours. We are opening that now on Fridays, or we will be shortly opening that on Fridays so that assistance will be available on Fridays. The municipal court that was located in the Regional Justice Center has moved out into their own courthouse, which left a bunch of traffic windows open. So we are taking over those windows, and we are going to train volunteers to staff those windows so that tenants can come in and in an appropriately socially distanced manner can get assistance, one-on-one assistance to help fill out their answer forms. And I think there's like 20 of those, 15, 20 of those windows. So it's a pretty good chunk. We are putting on some community trainings starting in the first week of June. We have 2 scheduled already to try to train, and these are really focused on training community partners, not necessarily tenants, but community partners who are interested in then being able to have their people reach out to tenants and assist them filing these answers. It takes no kind of legal knowledge or legal skill. It really is just somebody who can type and use a computer. So these trainings will train those other community groups to hopefully try to expand that reach. We are working with the library district right now to schedule some pop-up events. The thought is that on each pop-up day, we'll have a library location on the east side and one on the west side, where we will have an attorney there and we will have advocates there who can also help tenants fill out their answer forms if they have received an eviction notice. So right now we're looking at Fridays and Saturdays so that there's some weekend access. So that is, but the scheduling has not been exactly nailed down yet on those. We are working with the Boyd School of Law to train law student volunteers who will be available, who will volunteer their time to assist tenants over the phone. This will be really helpful for tenants who have transportation problems, who have no internet access, who can't use a computer or don't have a computer, so that they can just by appointment get set up with a law student who will prepare their answer for them using that guide and file program. We are also looking at a pro bono component. So we love to involve attorneys in the community in where there's a need, right? So there's a big need right now. And so we are going to, I think myself and Lauren Pena, who runs the Civil Law Self-Help Center, I think we are going to put on a training next month for pro bono attorneys who can come and be trained on how to represent a tenant through the eviction process. And then those attorneys in turn will agree to take, I think, 4 eviction cases to assist those tenants. So all of that is in the works. We are also opening our offices for limited assistance. Right now, our office, we haven't been seeing people at all in person. So we are opening our offices strictly by appointment to assist people with evictions. So that's some of the things that we're working on. Our big push is outreach though. So I'm sure we will be calling on the media, we will be calling on other community partners, we will be calling on everybody that we can think of to get that word out. We're creating some flyers. The flyers will be available on our website. So if anybody on this call has ideas about how we can get that word out, please let me know because we're happy to hear them. So the next thing I'll touch on is what's happening legislatively. So there were a number of landlord-tenant bills in the Nevada legislature this session. Most of those have died, somewhat intentionally, because the thought was in negotiating with the realtors and the landlords that there would be some other bill coming along to specifically address the eviction crisis that resulted from COVID. So right now, as far as I know, the only landlord-tenant bill that is really surviving is the eviction bill, or the landlord-tenant bill that would automatically seal eviction records of any eviction that was granted during the COVID crisis. So well, I'll call it the compromise bill, although I don't know exactly what the compromise was. I wasn't involved in it, but the new landlord-tenant bill just came out yesterday. Governor Sisolak came out in support of it. I think it's going to be scheduled for hearing next week. There's only like 11 days left in the legislative session. So if something's gonna happen, it's gotta happen quickly. But that landlord-tenant bill is important to this whole process because it does a couple of things. One of the big things it does, it creates a couple of affirmative defenses that tenants can use. So if a tenant is being evicted, but the tenant has a pending rental application and is waiting for a decision on that rental assistance, that under this bill, that would be an affirmative defense that would pause that eviction to allow that rental application to be either approved or denied. If it's approved and the money comes to the landlord, the eviction goes away. If it's not approved, then the eviction can go forward. The other thing it would do is make it an affirmative defense if the tenant has been approved, but the landlord has refused to accept the rental assistance money, which we have been seeing. And I think I've mentioned this before. I'm not really clear why we're seeing it, but we're seeing it. So again, those affirmative defenses kind of help slow the process and encourage, link the tenant with the rental assistance and encourage the landlord to take it. Another important thing it would do, it would steer all eviction cases into the mediation program. So right now, mediation is limited only to evictions for non-payment of rent. But as I mentioned before, when you direct anything to non-payment of rent, all that means is a bunch of other types of evictions are going to increase. So, so the bill would make all of the evictions go through that mediation program. There's no downside to it. It's an opportunity to talk about rent, because often in these lease violation evictions, the issue is really rent. So if we can get the landlord paid, keep the tenant in the property, that's all a good thing. Because if we don't use that money, the money goes away. So we need to use the money. It also, another cool thing that this bill will do, it actually sets up a rental assistance program for landlords. So it's specifically geared to smaller landlords. I think it's landlords who make under less than $4 million a year, primarily what they call the mom and pops, the single family home kind of landlords, where they can apply directly for rental assistance. So I think it's got something for everybody, and I think it's got some really good things. So hopefully that will be successful. I think those are all of the things I was going to cover. So right now, I'm not super keyed in onto the money, but I do know that right now, my understanding is Clark County has $160 million in that rental assistance pot. Another $200 million is coming from the federal government, from the latest American Rescue Plan legislation. So there's going to be a lot of money. There is also a big chunk of money coming down to help homeowners. So not tenants, but homeowners who are struggling with their mortgages. We are still waiting to see what that's going to look like. There was some guidance issued from the federal government. We haven't seen anything on the state level yet, though. So we're kind of waiting for the contours of that program to kind of take shape to see what it looks like. But honestly, right now, we aren't getting a lot of calls from homeowners. So I think homeowners right now are fine, but they won't be for long. So it's good. Hopefully by the time that starts becoming a crisis, that program will be in place and available to help people who need it. I think that's it. So I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has. That was a lot.
Thank you, Jim. That's a tremendous amount of amazing information. It gives Lori and her team a lot of, I think, clears up some questions we had. So that's incredibly helpful. I have several questions, but I want to see if anyone else has any. Lori, why don't you want to go ahead, Lori, or you want me to ask you decide.
You go first.
Okay, so Jim, a couple questions. I'm going to jump around a little. In the bill that you say might make it through that has the sealing of the eviction records, there was also a component for no-cause evictions that changed the timing. Did it stay complete, or did that was cut?
Yeah, unfortunately, that was cut pretty early on. Yeah.
I'm just making sure. Okay, and then
so there actually were two bills on the sealing, one from the Senate and one from the Assembly. And I think both of them might still be alive, but they kind of do the same thing. Although one of them had that extension of the no cause evictions that you're talking about, that's gone. But the other bill had an extension of the time, the notice period that a landlord has to give before they can raise the rent. I think it increased it from 30 days to 45 days for a month-to-month tenant, for a monthly tenant. I think that is still alive, that portion of the bill, but the extension of the no cause, unfortunately, is gone.
Okay. And then also, I just have a question about when these cases get to the courts. Eviction has been filed, and now we're telling the tenants to file the answer. I'm going to imagine the courts are going to be flooded like crazy. Are they changing? How are they manage it inside the courts? What if these aren't getting addressed in a time frame that the landlords think is sufficient, and they do like a lockout of their tenant? What are the precautions there?
So let me just step back for a minute and remind everybody how the eviction process works in Nevada. So every eviction starts by the landlord giving the tenant a notice, telling the tenant what the landlord thinks is they're doing wrong. It could be non-payment of rent, it could be a lease violation, etc. The first thing that happens after that is during that notice period, so let's say it's a notice for non-payment of rent, that's 7 days. During that 7-day period, the tenant has to file an answer. So the tenant is the first person who files with the court. The landlord then files after that, after the tenant's time has passed. So that's why it's so it's weird, because it's the tenant initiating their own case, but that's why it's so important for the tenant to take action on that. Now, as far as what the court is doing, I think the court is going to do its best to schedule the hearings as it can. Judge Saragosa from the Las Vegas Justice Court was at that press conference yesterday. She was talking about they have obtained 2 additional courtrooms so that they can spread out people a little bit more. If you've ever been to an eviction hearing, it's basically just like, it's like people crammed into a room going one after another. So they're trying to schedule those out a little bit more, spread them out a little bit more. I think all of that will probably slow down the pace of the hearings. But honestly, in this situation, that might not be a bad thing, because that gives Clark County Social Services more of an and their nonprofit partners more of an opportunity to make sure everyone's evaluated for rental assistance. Now, if a landlord gets impatient and locks out the tenant, that is a clear violation of Nevada law, and the landlord could not only be forced to let the tenant back in, but it also could be fined $2,500. So that is a no-no. Landlords should never, ever do self-help evictions unless the tenant has obviously vacated the property, like their stuff's gone and there has been no action at the property, activity at the property for multiple weeks. Then the landlord will probably take the property back. So landlords need to be careful about that.
And Jim, does this cover all levels of tenancy, the weekly motels?
It should, yes, yeah.
Okay. And then, so if once it hits the court, it could, I know you don't know the answer because the courts are trying to adjust, but it could be a lengthy time between when they file their answer and to when there's another contact with them, right? So if it's going several weeks, should the tenants worry?
No. So especially with the mediation component now built in, it is going to, especially in cases where the tenant has elected mediation, it is going to extend the process. So there will be a couple of things kind of modulating that. There will be the volume, which I think will impact how far out the courts are setting their hearings, but there's also going to be the mediation component, because if the tenant elects mediation, or if that bill passes and all cases are going to mediation, there's going to be some limitation on how many mediations can be scheduled. So the way it is currently working is landlord serves a notice, tenant files a complaint, landlord files an answer. The court then would issue a scheduling order, which would basically say, here's your mediation date. After your mediation date, an eviction hearing will be scheduled on this date. Now, what that's going to look like in a week, 2 weeks, I have absolutely no idea. But a tenant doesn't necessarily need to be worried as long as they've filed their answer and they know that their answer was accepted and that either their fee waiver was approved or their money was paid. They can always, the court has a website, they can always go on the court's website and check the status of their case to see if there's any activity, and if anybody has a question about what's happening in a case, contact us. We'd be happy to look up the case and tell them what's going on.
Excellent. Knowing that process, I think, is helpful. And will this still be offered virtually to folks? Do we know if this is in person versus virtually, even mediation?
You know, that's a great question, and I don't really know the answer to that. I think yes is the answer. The virtual is going to continue Judge Saragosa yesterday said that as bad as the pandemic was, there were some good things that might come out of it. And I think virtual appearances might be one of them. So just because the court has expanded to 3 courtrooms, that just means that 3 judges can now hear eviction cases. It doesn't necessarily mean that the tenants will be required to be there in person. So I think the virtual hearings will go forward.
Good. And then my last comment is on for outreach. Have you guys worked with PBS? Are you guys working with the PBS stations?
I don't know. Christine Miller in our office is heading up the outreach efforts, but we have worked with PBS in the past. They're awesome. So that's a great idea.
Yeah. Get on Kip Ortenberger's weekly show. He's amazing and he has a big reach. So, all right. So that's what I have for now. Tim from the Better Business Bureau posted something in the chat about some things happening in Dallas. But I also want to give Lori some time to ask her questions.
Thank you. One question, a couple things come to mind, Jim, and maybe we should know the answers to this, but some of our clients are really worried if they do get evicted, are they responsible for the debt of the past rent? So say they're 4 months behind in their rent, they get evicted, that was, we'll just say $4,000. Are they still liable to pay that $4,000 back to their landlords?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's really freaking people out for sure.
Sure.
And so just wanted to be clear on that. And you also said that if they, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Lori, a couple of things on that. So if the landlord has been paid rental assistance, the landlord can't receive double.
Right.
Tenants off the hook, obviously.
Right.
Now, so what happens if a tenant is evicted and there's a big bill? Usually what happens is the landlord will report that to collections, and then collections will notify credit reporting agencies. It will show up on the tenant's credit report and they'll start getting calls. There is a way to stop collection efforts if they need to do that. Ultimately, if the landlord wants to collect that money, the landlord's going to have to sue the tenant. So the landlord would sue the tenant in small claims, get a money judgment against them, and then try to collect it. Now, a lot of tenants right now are probably collection proof. If all they're getting is unemployment, all they're getting is anytime somebody just gets some kind of governmental benefit like Social Security or veterans benefits, you can't collect a judgment against them. All that money is protected. But eventually, the tenant's going to be back to work, hopefully. Now, above a certain amount, if you make below a certain amount, again, you're probably protected from collection because you have to have enough money to live. But above a certain amount, the landlord could start garnishing your wages. So yes, that is a big concern. We may roll out of this crisis with a lot of tenants who are severely debt burdened.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And the other thing you reminded us last time, like I said, our script reflects so much of what you've shared with us, is that to remind or encourage, whatever the word is, tenants and landlords to continue with the CHAP process, because if they don't, there is no money. Once they drop out of the process, there's no remedy to get that back rent, right? I'm not saying that very well,
That's
but
right.
yeah.
I mean, if they, for some reason they drop out of the process, they can always reapply. But once they're evicted, they're not a qualified tenant anymore. They're not eligible for that money. So the tenant needs to stay in the property, and both landlord and tenant need to work together to get that money.
Right.
The CHAP program just opened up a landlord portal. So now on the CHAP website, there's a tenant portal and a landlord portal. So the landlord can go on and just upload their documents. They're trying to make it as easy as possible for the landlords, because before the landlords had to sign a bunch of stuff, they had to hand deliver it or fax it in. And so they're trying to make it as easy as possible for everybody. But that money is just sitting there and we need to use it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And one last thing, what is your collaboration called again? Sorry, I didn't write it down. And
I just learned this yesterday. I think they're calling it the Southern Nevada Eviction Prevention Program.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Jim. That's my questions.
Thanks, Lori. So, Jim, this is my question that I ask you that I don't think is really yours. And I'm just curious, do we have a plan for those that do get evicted? We have a housing shortage. From what I understand, shelters are full, weekly motels are full. I don't like sending people there anyway. I'm gonna be really honest about that. Um, what is the plan? What is Nevada's plan for those that do get evicted? They are now without housing. I know there's a rapid rehousing program in Clark County going on. Do we know an idea of inventory for that? Again, I know you're not the housing guy, but
Well, I do have some good news on that front. So as part of this eviction prevention plan, Clark County is significantly beefing up its rehousing program because honestly, that program was pretty limited. I mean, I think it only applied to people who are actually homeless at the time. So now the idea is that some of that CARES money is going to go into this program so that if a tenant is being evicted, then that rehousing program can kick in and help that tenant find a new living situation. And instead of paying the landlord, who may not take the money or whatever the situation is, use that CARES money or that COVID relief money to pay first and last month's rent and a couple of months rent going forward. So to stabilize the tenant in a new situation. So I was very, very encouraged to hear that because you can do all the work on the back end to prevent the evictions, but evictions are still going to happen. So we need something on this end as well. Beyond Clark County, I honestly don't know. There were a number of bills in the legislative session about housing development and low-income housing and the housing crisis. And to my knowledge, all of them have died. So I have no good answer for you.
well, that was helpful to know that it's the rapid rehousing isn't just homeless focused and that they're developing a good plan or a better plan, in my opinion, first, last, and some months rent.
Yes.
And I know Legal Aid of Southern Nevada, that's your guys' geography. Is it Bailey, Borderland up north? Who do we interact with up north to figure out what's happening here?
So so Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada is just Clark County. In Northern Nevada, our sort of sister agency is Washoe Legal Services. I will say though, I don't know exactly what they're doing on the eviction front right now. There's also Nevada Legal Services is a statewide legal aid organization. So they have offices in Northern Nevada as well. Bailey Bordelin is our basically our lobbyist, the lobbyist for the legal aid organization. She represents all the legal aid organizations in legislative issues. So if you can contact her, she will absolutely get you to the right place.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's see, does anyone else have questions for Jim? Or go ahead and unmute yourself and if you'd like to. I thought I heard somebody.
I have a question, Linda. In regards to the rehousing program, is that open for individuals who are undocumented or not?
So my guess would be yes. So I believe that was one of the questions that was asked at the press conference yesterday. And Clark County Social, as far as the CHAPS program and the rental assistance, they are not even asking about status. My thought would be that the same would hold true for the rehousing portion of that. I hope that's the case, but I don't know that when I can't say that for certain.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that question, Elvira. It's important to know, and I know that some folks don't access services or programs for fear of certain pushback or impacts to them on other sides. So I appreciate that question. Anyone else? No, I know we had some first-time joiners today. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Those who come on a regular basis are new folks. I hope you learned a lot and can take back this amazing, extensive information that Jim has shared with us, and know that they're developing programs and tools at all times to try to accommodate folks on their navigating through this crisis and this process that's happening. Jim, thank you for everything you do. I mean that sincerely, and what the Legal Aid Center does. And folks, anyone who also serves the North, will be making sure we get that information in the North. Maybe next meeting will be focused on that. Again, I want to thank everybody for their participation, their contributions. And Jim, thank you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye, everybody.